Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. How was your weekend? I have to admit, I finally feel like I might have caught up with myself. I went out on Saturday night with some friends, spent the rest of the weekend dozing in front of the TV while watching Wimbledon tennis. Just what the doctor ordered. Now, a couple of things. First of all, my latest weekly column dropped just this morning. It's called Lies, Damned Lies, and HSE Statistics. And it follows on from our discussion last week, which may have been on Friday last week, about why the HSE only reports on some industry related deaths and not others. You can find that using the link that I'm about to post in the chat right about, let me see. Now, you should be seeing that right now. I also wanted to remind you very quickly that we will be hosting the third of our Wednesday evening shows, and this one is gonna be a bit different. The past two have featured brand new equipment. Our third show will take a look back, actually, rather than looking forward, it's gonna look back, and this time it's gonna looking at the origins of the Bobcat loader. It really will be a trip down memory lane filled with nostalgia, so if that's the kind of thing you're into, please join us at 7 PM on Wednesday evening. Wherever you're watching this, we'll be there. And finally, for now at least, I'm about to start work on something a little bit new. I've been thinking, excuse me one second, I can hear myself in the background. I think that's cured it. Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a bit of a behind the scenes series to accompany this show. The trouble is, behind the scenes of this show is actually pretty dull. I get out of bed, pull together the video clips for the day, write a script, and that's it. And then I do the same thing 220 odd times a year. However, there are some things that go on behind the scenes that I do want to capture, not least of which are some of the online conversations that take place either as a result of articles or articles that I've written or views that I've expressed, or that might become talking points for the future. Now, I'm hoping to film one, possibly even two of those today, and they will be available via our YouTube channel, and I will let you know when and where you can see them, all via the WhatsApp group, should you so desire. And I can tell you now, I have a name for the new show. Obviously, this is the Breakfast Show, and the initials of the Breakfast Show are BFS, and behind the scenes abbreviates to BTS. So the new show will be called BFS BTS. Get used to it and watch this space. Now, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road. Before we kick things off, I do want to say a very quick few good mornings. Rattling through, Mark Whiting's here. Good morning, Mark. Glenn Johnston, Craig Williams, and Steve Williamson is here as well. Jeff Pinion's here. Morning, Jeff. You may notice I'm sporting a Brock t-shirt today. Thank you very much indeed for that. And there was somebody else lurking in the chat there. Jim Turner is also here. Good morning, Jim, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. Come back to all of those guys in just a moment. But it is Monday, the 10th of July. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, Caterpillar's new economy excavator. We're on the level with Mazio Attachments, how Komatsu builds its dozers for multiple lifetimes, and we have an inspired and inspiring use of tech from Bobcat. And we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But first, let us peer back through the mists of time to see what was happening on this day in history. I've just posted the question of the day, which I'll come back to in just a second, but I'm pleased to see that I'm not the only person that picks and chooses their type of bread according to the application. Thank you very much. You've just made me feel like I'm maybe not a lunatic after all. On this day in 1040, Lady Godiva supposedly rode through Coventry naked to force her husband to lower taxes. Not entirely sure what her plan was, but I'm all for naked women riding through the town of Coventry. In Where is that? 1919. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Treaty of Versailles. In 1940, the Battle of Britain began. Glad I wasn't around for that one. And in 1973, the grandson of oil tycoon J. Paul Getty was kidnapped in Rome. And in 2002, can you believe this is 21 years ago, Coldplay released their debut album, Parachutes, complete with It Was All Yellow. Now, before we get into the real meat of the show, let me remind you, I've already mentioned it once, but I'll remind you of the question of the day. Yes, today is that most fundamental question at sandwich time. Are you brown bread or are you white bread? Now, I have a foot in both camps, and it appears I'm not alone. If I'm having bacon or sausage or fried egg sandwich, white bread all the way, the cheaper the better. If, however, I'm having cheese or if I'm having toast and marmalade, then I'm brown. Absolutely 100% brown. How about you? Let me know in the chat. Now, enough of bread. Let's start the show. About 2 weeks ago, my YouTube feed lit up with details of a brand new Caterpillar excavator called the 320GX. There were several versions of the video, all of them in foreign languages, and they were all about a new economy Cat machine. Naturally, I assumed that the machine was meant purely for certain global markets that were maybe a little more price sensitive. But then, lo and behold, first thing this morning, an English language version of the video dropped just this morning. So this is what the 320GX from Caterpillar looks like. Yeah, given the state of the global economy, the arrival of the Cat 320GX could be perfectly timed, I have to say, from Caterpillar. I also wonder if UK plant hirers will take a closer look at an economy model. They do like to buy them cheap and stack them high, don't they? But what do you all make of the Cat 320GX? Could we see other manufacturers offering budget versions of their machines? Let me know in the chat. And this is where we see how the audience is often divided over types of machines. So, I just played you the Cat 320 GX. Ken Hatcher, quick off the mark, morning Ken, says, Cat makes a nice machine. I agree. Dan Cullen says, Cat looks real good. I agree with that too. Gary Muirhead says, the Cat 320 GC were absolutely terrible. Weird how people see the same machine and see it differently, isn't it? Now, at ConExpo earlier this year, I met up with a team from Mazio Attachments, and they were a really nice bunch of people, really welcoming and enthusiastic. Now, I was obviously there primarily to talk to them about demolition attachments, but as it turns out, there's more to Mazio Attachments than just demolition tools. Yeah, I think I need to take a closer look at Mazio Attachments in the future. And maybe I was distracted by chocolate, because Gary Muirhead has just reminded me. I actually came back from ConExpo clutching some Maxio chocolates. And I think, well, obviously, Gary actually won some on the show. And let's put it like this. We had 2 packs. Gary won one of them. The other one didn't make it quite that far. And you're right, absolutely delicious. Yes, I honestly don't choose content according to chocolate. But if anyone would like to send me some more chocolate, listen, I'll be more than happy to review it for you. We have discussed machine rebuilds on this show plenty of times before, how it's possible to get a second and even a third life out of specific machines, how that greatly reduces owning and operating costs, and how that can potentially reduce the carbon emissions required to build a new machine. Well, as you're about to hear, none of that happens by accident. And in the case of Komatsu, some machines are designed specifically for multiple lifetimes.
A capital investment like this is made to last, many, many hours in the field. We took a look at the mainframe, the backbone of the machine. We essentially doubled the design life. So this machine is designed to withstand multiple rebuild cycles throughout its service life. One thing that we did do is take customer feedback, and they told us, Komatsu, we really need a very sturdy and stiff push group. So we completely, on the D475A-8, re-engineered the push group, the push arms, the blade support structure. We reduced maintenance points. The trunnions, significantly larger than the old machine. Those trunnions could even be rotated 180 degrees to be put back in service and further reduce those maintenance costs. So that's really the overall goal, is we want the machines to be down for planned and certainly unplanned maintenance as little as possible. We want them getting back into production.
I wonder how the maths of all that works out. Are you better off buying an economy machine like the Cat 320GX that we featured just a few moments ago, or are you better off paying that little bit more, or possibly quite a bit more, for a machine that might last for several lifetimes? What do you think? Let me know in the chat.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
We talk a lot about technology on this show, about how it can improve accuracy and precision, how it can enhance productivity, how it makes machines easier to manage and to monitor. But there are other benefits, as you're about to see.
Growing up around heavy equipment my whole life, it's just been like one of those things, like I don't think I could ever see myself doing anything different. And I think one of the best things about it is when somebody they've never heard of it, and they see this machine driving through a job site, like there's nobody in the machine, they're looking at it, like, it's interesting to see that. That's like one of the best expressions you get from people, is them seeing a machine just kind of doing its own thing, and they're wondering, like, what the heck's going on. My name is Brandon Trimborn. I'm the owner-manager at Triple T. We were all hanging out together, just we were out riding ATVs, having a good time, and ended up rolling an ATV, and I ended up breaking my C6, C7 vertebrae in my neck. I was thinking, like, maybe I won't ever be able to get into a machine again. At the time, my biggest emotions were kind of my dad, like, what's he going to have to deal with now that I'm gone?
New Mexico is a very high energy state for solar. We literally do work all over the state of New Mexico. So the big thing was, how was he going to fit back into this?
After I heard about Max Control, I reached out to Brandon, so we were able to get one, secure one. So Brandon was one of the early adopters. As soon as they announced it, I thought that this would be huge for him.
He kind of explained it to me what it was. I was like, man, I can use my phone. Like, that's like simple. The first thing in my mind was like, holy crap, like I could actually unload this machine off the trailer. Like, hey, I could I can actually like do these small things, like, where it doesn't require me taking all this time to try to get into the machine. It was one of those moments where you think, like, I'm never going to be able to do this again, and then all of a sudden something comes out and you're able to do somewhat what you were able to do in the past,
Being able to recommend Max Control and it enable Brandon to still be actively engaged in his family's business is huge.
For him to be acknowledged and for them to reach out to him and really try to take care of him, it was such a blessing.
Knowing that Bobcat is in the forefront when it comes to compact equipment, I'm thankful for the position that I have.
The biggest thing was that it was able to help me do the things that I wasn't able to do previously because of my injury, but I definitely wouldn't be out in the field as much as I am. That's for sure.
It's really helped him to feel independent and to be able to manage his jobs in the way that he would before.
You can always count on your machine to be there for you in a crunch. I probably would have not been able to do half the things that I maybe did with the Max Control.
I think you will agree. That is inspired and inspiring use of technology from Bobcat. Obviously, that's very future-facing Bobcat. But don't forget, on this Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, we'll be looking back to where the Bobcat story began. And there's also going to be a Bobcat model up for grabs on that show too. So I hope you can join us 7 p.m. wherever you're watching this, 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Come and join us for the Bobcat origin story. Now, a bit of this. So I was having a bit of a moan this weekend over on LinkedIn about how the loss of grandfather rights might impact those operators and operatives that have been in the industry for some time. Obviously, there will be a financial cost of switching up cards. There already appears to be a huge amount of confusion out there, and I'm not entirely convinced that all those that will be affected actually know they're about to be affected. But having had some dealings with our friend Graham Williams this past week or two, another thought struck me. As regular viewers will know, Graham is very seriously dyslexic. So not only would he struggle to sit any kind of test, even applying to take the test is beyond him. So I did a very quick search. It turns out that dyslexia is far more widespread and commonplace than I could probably have imagined. Here in the UK, let me try that again. Here in the UK, there are more than 6 million dyslexia sufferers. According to Google, that means it affects around 1 in 10 people. Now, if you apply that statistic to the number of workers likely to be impacted by the loss of grandfather rights, that's somewhere between 7,000 and 20,000 people. So my first question, I guess, was, do the training companies have systems in place to handle an influx of dyslexic people? Well, it turns out that they do, apparently, but you'll have to pay for the privilege. According to one comment, it will cost candidates an additional £40 to have someone read the questions for them. Now, surely that constitutes discrimination. Dyslexia is classified as a disability, and if you're charging extra, surely that constitutes discrimination against the disabled. But it goes deeper than that. The last time some of the operatives and operators sat a test, they may have done so using nothing more than paper and pen. Today, you're required to apply online and actually do the test at least partly on a computer. Are we absolutely certain that the UK industry is sufficiently computer literate? And I'll go back to what I said when I first started covering the planned abolition of grandfather rights. We already have a skill shortage. As an industry, we're already failing to attract sufficient young people to replace the older generation in the sector. So can we really afford to place these obstacles in the way of experienced men and women that are the very backbone of the sector? I'm going to be covering that in greater detail on one of the first of our behind-the-scenes shows. That is BFS BTS, Breakfast Show Behind the Scenes, BFS BTS. So watch out for that. Until then, if you have any comments on this, please let me know in the chat. They may well factor into our behind-the-scenes show. Anyway, that's my gripe of the day. I'd love to hear yours. What is it that grinds your gears, gets your goat, and generally butters your parsnips? The daily gripe therapy session will return sometime. Right, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying. If you can't stick around for that, then please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. But if you do have the time and the inclination, please stick around. The Craic will commence immediately after this final word from our show sponsor. Right, traditional after show theme. That's the one we want. Good morning, gang. How are we all doing this fine day? I'm going to go right the way back to the beginning of the chat. And Dan Cullen, I was expecting Dan to be missing in action today, bearing in mind he's just started a new job just this morning up in Belper in Jim Turner Land, but he's here regardless. Good morning to you, Dan. Gary Muirhead was second off the mark. Gary, I will be sending you a message immediately after this show. It's a message of thanks and of desperation. It'll make sense when it gets there. Thank you in advance. Mark Whiting's in the house, third off the mark. Good morning, Mark. Nice to see you keen and eager this morning. Our friend from CSW Groundworks, Craig Williams, is in the house as well. Steve Williamson, star of Stage and Screen, is here as well. Good morning to you, Steve. Mick Norton is in the house. Comments from Mick will appear in one of our first behind-the-scenes shows. On the subject of stuff, lies, damn lies, and HSE statistics. That is my latest weekly column. You can read that using the link in the chat. If you can't be bothered with that, then just go to LinkedIn. Go and search for me on LinkedIn. You'll find it there nice and easily. Chris Falk, good morning, Chris. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Graham Williams, I've just mentioned him in the chat. Good morning. LinkedIn has been fun this weekend. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I woke up feeling perfectly cheerful on Sunday and then decided to have a bit of a moan. Jeff Pinion's here as well. Morning, Jeff. Thank you very much indeed for being here, and thank you again for the t-shirt. Rather fetching in orange this morning. Machine landed, and coincidence, it's a Bobcat. Dan Cullen is apparently in a Bobcat this morning. Good morning, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for that. Jim Turner is in the house. Now, my question of the day, awfully complicated one this morning. My question was this: brown or white bread? Now, I've already mentioned that I differentiate bacon sandwich, fried egg sandwich, sausage sandwich, white bread, the cheapest possible. Toast and marmalade must be brown. Cheese and pickle, a personal favourite of mine, must be brown as well. I thought maybe I was a bit strange with that. Turns out, not so much. Question of the day: if it's toast, it's got to be white, and if it's sandwich, then it's brown bread, says Gary Newman. Interesting. Chris Ford, 50-50, egg sardies and a white carb. Oh, yeah, I can get on board with that. Ken Hatcher's in the house. Morning, Ken. And Stephen Guthrie's here as well. Ken Hatcher says brown as it's more healthy. This is the man who consumes his body weight in pizza every Friday night, people. And he's lecturing us on health. Do you go for the whole meal pizza base, Ken? I'm guessing you probably don't. Ear for John Paul Getty. If you know, you know. I know. Thank you very much indeed for that. Question of the day says Steve Williamson. White bread, fine. Brown bread, really dry. But my favourite is tiger loaf. You see, I have a bit of a special relationship with tiger loaves. Tiger loaves work very, very well. Those of you that have ever been fishing, just to let you know, tiger bread works exceptionally well as a carp bait. I occasionally go carp fishing, less so now because my former carp fishing buddy is no longer with us, but I still occasionally go carp fishing, and there is always a tiger loaf sat by my side. The problem is the carp probably get less than an eighth of the loaf, and I sit there picking at it the entire day. Even when the sun's completely dried it out, I'm still sat there munching on bits of crust, which is probably why I don't catch very much. Question of the day: white bread, brown bread gives me indigestion, says Jim Turner. I love granary bread with loads of seeds in. Yeah, that's a healthy option right there. I said it actually during the show. It always strikes me as very, very odd how some people see machines, and I'm sure it's other things as well, but see them in a different light. So, Kate Hatcher, part of the Cat Fan Club. Dan Cullen, part of the Cat Fan Club. Gary Muirhead, not so much. Absolutely terrible, according to Gary. At least the GC was. And the GC, I don't know. There's no explanation that I found so far of where the GC stops and the GX begins. Is this an even cheaper version than the GC? I don't know. We will come back to that because somebody makes a very relevant comment about that. Question of the day: brown bread because it's made using whole wheat, making it more nutritious and rich in fibre, says McMillan. However, 77 calories for a slice of white and 75 for a slice of brown. Did you know that, or did you just research that really, really quickly? Because I'm impressed either way. Mazio Attachments do make some fantastic chocolates. Yeah, they certainly do. And just bear with me 1 second. They also gave me a gift, which has been sat on my desk for quite some time. I met up with the Maxio Attachments team. They spotted on Instagram the fact that I was at ConExpo and sent me a direct message and said, come over. And the guy that sent me the direct message, whose name I don't have to hand, and I do apologise for that, but he was actually from Colombia, and he gave me that. It is actually a Starbucks mug, but it came all the way from Colombia, and it's been sat on my desk ever since, untouched by human hands, and yet to actually enjoy any coffee. I'm saving it until I've got some decent Colombian coffee. It seems only appropriate. But yeah, Maxio, really nice bunch of people. Really impressed with them. All manufacturers should offer a no-frills version of their products. That's the point I wanted to come back to. Should they? Given the economic climate at the moment, would that be a good option? And what is it? What is it that the GX Caterpillar strips out? It appeared that there wasn't a great deal in the way of tech buried within that, but what are they actually stripping out? And I guess the obvious question is, how much of a saving are you making? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? And what are you losing? What are you gaining? And going back to that point about the rebuild of the Komatsu dozer, where is the cutoff point? Are you, and I realise we're comparing dozers and excavators here, so I apologise for that, but are you better off buying a cheap as chips excavator and then after 2 or 3 years throwing it in the bin and starting the whole process again? Or are you better off paying top dollar and getting a machine that can be rebuilt and rebuilt? And I realise I'm talking financial cost here, and I realise there is a sustainability and emissions cost, but I wonder what the maths on that pan out to be. On the dual grade dozer, I would have preferred to see the operator without the assistance of the auto laser device, says Mick Norton. Komatsu have always done the biz in keeping unplanned maintenance to the minimum. I think all of the major manufacturers do that, to be perfectly honest, but it's a good point. It is a very good point. Andy Bullock says, brilliant. I don't know what he's saying brilliant about, but I agree. Whatever it was, I agree. Craig Williams, nice little vid from Komatsu. For me, the changes on machinery and also the technology changes so quickly. Plus, I like and love all the new functions, cab upgrades, more importantly, the efficiency. I 100% agree. Let's be absolutely honest. If it weren't for continuous upgrades and improvements of machines, I wouldn't have much of a show, would I? I'd be sat here twiddling my thumbs. I mean, I do quite a bit of that anyway, but even more so. Andy Bullock goes on to say, I got all my tickets on grandfather rights. I let tractor, dozer and 180-degree machines go. Too much of a pain in the ass to keep all these tickets going. And that is precisely the point. That is precisely the point. Now, the point there, let's take the 180 machine as an example. I guess from a personal standpoint, Andy, if a job comes up that requires that 180 ticket, you can't go for it, which is one thing. But does that now mean that we are losing operators on specific categories? And I find it interesting the fact that you've mentioned the 180. Bearing in mind that we've been talking previously about the fact that the backhoe loader is kind of in decline. It's kind of going out of fashion. Is that something that prompted you, or I wonder which way around this works? Are there less people worrying about 180-degree qualifications and therefore there are less machines, or are there less machines and therefore there are people less inclined to operate that type of machine? But it's an interesting point, and the very fact that you're letting qualifications slide. Let me do that again. I'm going to do that again. You're not letting qualifications slide, because you could probably jump on a 180 machine or a tractor dozer just as easily today as you could have done 5 years ago. You're letting cards slide. And isn't that a damning indictment on the card scheme itself? The fact that rather than paying money and going through the hassle and the rigmarole of keeping those cards going, it's easier just to say, do you know what? Nah, bun that off. Grey Williams, I'm known as BFG, Big Friendly Giant. That's my administration. I think that's probably a registration of the car. BFG, yeah. Just going back, I think that was prompted by the fact that our new unscripted show is going to be BFS BTS, Brake Car Show behind the scenes. Mick Norton, although the likes of CSCS and CITB offer dyslexia candidates assistance, it is often not enough to have just to have a reader recorder. Even the prerequisites of logging in, booking a test and the payment process are often impossible for a dyslexia candidate. My point entirely. And as I say, my youngest daughter is dyspraxic, not dyslexic. She reads and writes absolutely fine, but she is dyspraxic. And it was only when you actually get to know somebody with dyspraxia that you realise just how commonplace that is. And I'm sure it's the case with dyslexia. I personally don't know anyone with dyslexia. One of my very early girlfriends when I was like 16, 17 years old was dyslexic, and I only discovered it, I'd have been 17, I think. I actually met her in a pub. And, we got on quite well. We got on like a house on fire. And at the end of the evening, I said, "Oh, give me your telephone number and we'll meet up." And she said, "No, you give me yours." Fine. So I gave her my telephone number. This is mobile phone, pre-exchanging of numbers in that way. And it transpired that when I actually got the call from her, she said, the reason I couldn't tell you my telephone number is I can't write. Not a big deal. And she was a smashing girl, and we had some fun, shall we say? But yeah, I've not really rubbed up. That's a poor expression. I've not really encountered too many dyslexic people, but 1 in 10 of the UK population, or thereabouts, is said to be partly or wholly dyslexic. So we've got this situation now where, in order to get your new cards, you've got to apply online, possibly do part of the test or the exam on a computer or also online. Where does that leave these people? We are deliberately discriminating, and then to make them pay extra for the privilege of going to work, absolute disgrace. And counter that, and I realise that comparing dyslexia with an all-terrain vehicle accident or the aftermath of that, I realise that's stretching a point, but we do have 2 examples there. There is Bobcat developing technology that has allowed a disabled operator to go back to work sat in his wheelchair, so basically meeting a disabled person halfway. And yet here in the training regime within the UK construction industry, we are expecting not only disabled people to go even further, to not go halfway but to go all the way, but then to pay for the privilege. It's a blooming disgrace, I tells you. I quite like orange, red now and again. Not a clue what that means. Pepper bread from... Pepper bread? I'm brown bread on beans on toast. See, I'm the other way round. Other way round. Tiger bread with mussels. Dip it in the garlic sauce. You see, there are certain things, and I would include mussels. I'm a fan, but I would also include things like garlic prawns and quite a few pasta dishes. I enjoy them while I'm eating them, but the best bit by a mile is mopping up afterwards with a big old chunk of bread. Totally agree with you on that one, Steve. You and I are on the same hymn sheet there, my friend. Only issue up here, not much vegan alternatives available. I was actually vegetarian for about 6 years. 2008 to about 2014, 15 or thereabouts. And the time I struggled the most was actually out on the road. When you're driving long distances, and you actually, I'm bloody starving here. Your little chef didn't do a great deal that catered for your average vegetarian. The motorway service areas don't. I think we've come a long way, but veganism, that's even more problematic, I would have thought. The huge dozers like that, probably more cost effective to get them done up, maybe. Yeah, and I also wonder if you are investing upwards of £1 million or thereabouts on a big dozer, you would like to think that the operator that you hand the keys to is going to take awfully good care of that machine. If not, he's like to get his marching orders. So maybe there is even more to work with when that machine reaches X number of operating hours. Andy Bullock, I'm just sticking to 360 now, more local work. Yeah, well, given the cost of diesel and petrol at the moment, I don't blame you one bit. It's lack of routine maintenance that stops the machine being rebuilt. Bushes and bearings, etc. are there to be replaced before the main structure starts to be eaten away by wear. That's when the machine becomes uneconomical to keep rebuilding. And yet, I'm almost on a daily basis, our WhatsApp group is filled with people like Dan Cullen and Nigel Williams bemoaning the fact that a lot of operators on the sites that they're on aren't doing their pre-site checks, they're not maintaining the machines properly and that kind of thing. Why is that not being monitored? I mean, I realise personal responsibility, I realise it is the operator is expected to do that, but surely if you can see that they're not doing that through either face-to-face, actually going to look at the machine and seeing that those checks aren't being made and the machines aren't being greased and lubricated as they should. If they're not being monitored by telematics, go and have a look, because there is, as Jim has rightly said there, if you can safeguard that machine a little bit more, you might just get a second life out of it. You might even get a third life out of it. 5 years ago, I let 5 tickets go at different types, and I only got me 1.8. Really got me 360. I have to say, Graham, I pity you enormously with your dyslexia. I'm really trying. I'm guessing that means you've got your 180. Not sure what the last bit means. My apologies. I wish I could get my head around that. Jim Turner, give us a shout later about the timbers we've got here. There is a private conversation going there apparently. Dan Cullen also says, not seen any milk alternatives as issue at the moment. Must go shopping later. My wife struggles with that. She is, bizarrely, my wife is not lactose intolerant in any way, shape or form. But places like Starbucks and Costa Coffee, if she has milk in one of those places, stand back, it's not a pretty sight. And yet she will happily have white coffee here at home without a problem. So she is very much an oat milk merchant when we're out and about. And oat milk, yep, some places you can, some places you can't. Turns out we were expecting to get a bit of resistance when we were in Italy a few months ago, because obviously the Italians are very protective of the way that they do food and drink. Oat milk everywhere, absolutely everywhere, not a problem at all. Training does not tell you the simple things like the correct tension of your tracks. This should be one of the many things they need to introduce into new training ops. The more you see of the whole training regime, the cost, the complexity, and I keep coming back to this, and I'm sure most of you will agree with this. I did maths at school, and I passed an exam. That exam did not make me a mathematician, not even remotely. I could go, with some practice, I could go and take an excavator test, and I could get an excavator card. I am a terrible operator. Now, obviously, if I was going to spend a lot more time, I'd like to think I could knock off the rough edges. But just a piece of plastic does not, in any way, shape or form, make me an operator. It is things like Steve just mentioned there. Blowing out filters, checking oil levels, making sure the machine's greased, making sure that the tension on your tracks is right. Those are fundamentals that are not included in training. And if they're not included in training, what the hell is the point of the training in the first place? Don't like getting covered in grease, using out-of-date grease guns. I'm lactose intolerant as well, says Dan Cullen. 360 digger and rubber duck. All makes sense now. My apologies, Graham. As I say, Graham and I are now having an ongoing conversation where I use text because he can play it on his phone, and he actually sends me voice messages back. And as much as I appreciate the input, it really has been an absolute eye-opener of how difficult life must be if you are dyslexic. It really must, to the point where I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this on Saturday night, about the fact that I didn't mention Graham by name, but a guy I'm speaking to is dyslexic, and he was saying we as a nation and as a society, we have been very, very keen and very quick to leap aboard the computerization bandwagon. My parents, both sadly no longer with us, but when COVID hit, I taught them both how to order their weekly shopping on using the Sainsbury's app. And I pre-programmed it with all of their favourites, so all that my mum had to do once a week or whatever it was, go and tick the various bits that she needed, press the order button, pay, and it would be delivered a couple of hours later. Absolutely fine. But I had to teach them that. Now, my mum was pretty computer savvy. My dad never touched a computer in his life. Literally up until the day he died, it was a mystery to him. We have a whole generation of those. And as I mentioned there, I mean, some of these people that are qualified or that are currently qualified may well have been operating machines for 20 or 30 years. 30 years ago, not everybody had a computer. They certainly didn't have a smartphone in their pocket. So there was we're now talking about a generation of people for whom computers may still be entirely alien. And yet, despite that, if you want to get your renewed ticket under the replacement for grandfather rights, MVQs and all the tosh that goes with it, you've got to apply online. You've then got to communicate online, presumably. You've got to sit at least part of your test using a computer, touchscreen or whatever it might be, all of which I would eat it for breakfast because I live and breathe computers. I'm sat in front of one for 12 hours a day. But there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions of people out there that don't do that. And then by the time you factored in the less than computer literate, you factor in the dyslexics, you factor in those for whom English is not a first language, that we are talking tens of thousands of people. And let's not lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about here is people's livelihoods. There will come a time when somebody will pull the plug and say, at this point, unless you've got this piece of plastic, you can no longer work. But in order to get that piece of plastic, you have to be able to use a computer, read and write effectively. And over and above this, I mean, I've never actually met Graham Williams face to face. Seems a smashing fella online, but I've never met him face to face. But we could be talking here about some of the very, very, very best operators in the business who have been doing it for 20, 30 years. They've learned the ropes, they've learned the hard way, they've paid their dues, they've been in every single application known to humankind, and now we're going to say, actually, that piece of plastic that you carry doesn't count anymore. We're going to take that away, and unless you can drive a computer and read and write properly, you're out of the door. How on earth does that make any sense at all? Abu Mohammed. Hello, friends and brothers and friends. I'm a Pakistani citizen, operator of bulldozer, D155A in Saudi Arabia. From my short years of experience, Komatsu is a beautiful and strong machine. Abu Mohammed, first of all, welcome aboard. I'm going to give you your welcome confetti. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. All the way from Saudi Arabia, behind the levers of a D155A, and he says Komatsu is a beautiful and strong machine. Abu Mohammed, I agree. Komatsu are a beautiful and strong machine. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and thanks for letting us know that you were there. 30 years ago is when you had to use your head for numbers and levels, no laser levels or GPS. See, I think that's where there is I take your point, Dan, but I think there's a difference there. You can still go to work regardless of whether you can use lasers and GPS. There is still work out there for operators that can't use that. That's the arrival of that might make life easier. It might make jobs more accurate, might make jobs more productive and precise, but it's not preventing people from going to work. A switch in the way that cards are done and the loss of grandfather rights actually directly impacts a man or a woman's ability to earn their living. And think about this. I'm going to go to Mick Norton in just a second. Think about this at its most fundamental level. You have left school, you have found your feet in construction, and you have worked your way through. So let's for argument's sake, say 30 odd years ago, Joe Blob started work. He's 17, still a bit wet behind the ears, and somebody's handed him the keys of a site dumper. And he's had a go on the site dumper, quite enjoyed it, and he's decided, actually, I'd quite like to have a go on that mini excavator. So somebody has taken him under their wing and put him on a mini excavator. Turns out he's pretty good at that as well, but he's quite ambitious. So now he fancies having a go on a 360 excavator, big one, big 20, 30, 40 tonner. It turns out he's brilliant on that. He's so good, in fact, that he's now decided, you know what I've always wanted to do? I've always wanted to be able to drive a dozer. So he goes and drives a dozer. Turns out he's fantastic at that. And now somebody's coming along saying, you've got the wrong piece of plastic, you can't do that anymore. That's what we're talking about. It's like somebody turning up at the Wimbledon tennis centre today and saying to Novak Djokovic, yep, you are absolutely, without question, the best in the world at what you do, but you've got the wrong bit of plastic on your bike. How does that make any sense at all? Many grandfather rights card holders will inevitably offload surplus categories from their ticket purely because of the cost implications. And why would we do that? Why, in the midst of a skill shortage, would we put in place obstacles that will lead to people either leaving the sector entirely and going to stack shelves in Sainsbury's? I don't know why I keep going back to Sainsbury's, but stack shelves in Sainsbury's, or I've got 15 tickets, I'm good at all of them, but I can only afford to be qualified as competent on 2 of them. What the hell is that all about? I'm going to put that up, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, because I don't know how you pronounce it. But that is a message from Mick Norton to our friend Abu Mohammed. I'm guessing he's saying something like good morning. I hope it's something like good morning. But thank you very much indeed for that, Mick. And well done on the Arabic. Well impressed. Andy Bullock, I learned on a Hymax 580C by jumping on it when the driver went for his breakfast. No tickets back then and nobody got killed. People did get killed. Let's be absolute. Let's reframe this. I am not saying that training should be abolished. I'm not. I think training is right. I think training needs to be valid, and going back to what we were saying with Steve Williamson, track tensions, oil filters. I think it needs to be focused. I am not for one moment saying that training doesn't have its place. But first of all, penalising people that are proven to be able to do the job, and then further penalising those that know they can do the job, can prove they can do the job, but happen to be dyslexic or for whom English isn't a first language. Makes no sense whatsoever. Thank you for that, Mick. He was actually saying welcome in Arabic. Impressed. I think the reason we are good at operating plant, lots of different plant, is because we aren't interested in operating a pen. Maybe that's why I'm such a terrible operator, because that's my tool of choice. Well, that and this, obviously. Andy Bullock, I should say I didn't kill anyone. I'm very glad to hear that. But it does just seem like a complete, excuse me 1 second, a complete lack of joined up thinking. And it reminds me, I know this is a subject we touch on a regular basis here. We have government ambitions to reduce our reliance as a nation, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. So we've knocked down all our coal-fired power stations, which would be perfectly fine. It's done the demolition industry the world of good. It's done the environment the world of good. It would be absolutely fine if they had put in place replacements for those coal-fired power stations before they came to us. If we had nuclear or solar or wind or whatever it might be, if we'd had that, nobody would have batted an eyelid. We would all be using our electric cars and our electric machines without a single concern or fear in the world. We have now got the situation in the UK construction industry where we have a skill shortage. We know, and we've known for decades, we are terrible at attracting young people into the industry. So we've got the older generation are falling out the bottom of the industry, and we're not topping up the top of the funnel with young people. The last thing we need to do is to put in place an obstacle like this grandfather rights abolition that will push even more people through the bottom of that funnel and out of the industry. There's just a complete lack of joined up thinking. Got to go. Have a great day, lads, and stay safe. Don't forget, tell your loved ones you love them, and you're thinking of them. Looking forward to getting back to it now, guys. Yeah, go and do your thing, Dan. Enjoy your day. And yes, training is the key. The training. This is where I find analogies sometimes work best. Obviously, I'm not a construction person. I'm a journalist, but it would be like me being taught to be a journalist, and taught the intricacies of grammar and spelling and story structure, but not actually being told how to turn a computer on. That's what we're talking about. If you can't look after the machine that you're on, you're not an operator. You're really not. You're not. You can operate, but you're not an operator. And that's the difference. Trainee operators should be allowed on the site on an L plate, and newly qualified ops should be on N plates for a year. I agree. I totally agree. And I, to a large degree, I think that would help them. We hear horror stories all the time of people, wet behind the ears. They go onto site and they start to get abused because they're too slow or a bit too methodical or a bit too careful. I don't know how you can be too careful behind the wheels or behind the levers of an excavator, but they're told they're too slow and they're not productive enough. If you've got an L plate on there, I would like to think the industry would go, okay, fair enough, let's make allowance, or hopefully a more experienced operator might every sort of lunchtime or every once in a while put their arm around them. Yeah, you come in, try doing this or try doing that. Have you thought about this? That's how you learn. Mick Norton says, however, regarding grandfather rights tickets, many employers run listed. Is that run listed or unlisted their employees with every conceivable category back in the day? In truth, many of these operators were not formally competent, and any enforced retest years down the line might prove embarrassing for some. I take that on board. Yeah, I take that on board. And listen, I would like to think, I don't get on site anywhere near as much as I would like. I would like to think that when I'm on site, the people that are working above, below, and beside me are competent, and competent, not just competent generally, competent on the very machine that they are actually operating in at that given time. So I totally accept that. Totally accept that 100%. However, to actively discriminate against people who are quite... We've said this before. The biggest cut-off in terms of good and bad operators in this industry are those that employ them. If you are a terrible operator, if you're slow, if you're unsafe, if you don't look after your machine, then sooner or later your employer will catch on and they will show you the exit. That is how you sort the wheat from the chaff. So if you've been an operator for 30 years and you've got a CV that proves that, if you've earned if you've been in gainful employment for 20 or 30 years as an excavator operator, then the chances are you're an excavator operator. You're not playing at it. You're the real deal, and you've got a bunch of employers in the past that would stand up and be counted and say that you were. That piece of plastic doesn't count for nothing. I almost swore. I resisted. So yes, it's. I am going to readdress this with our new. It's not a new show. It's a new format. So basically, there's a lot of conversations that I get involved in, particularly on LinkedIn these days for some reason, where it's either something I've written or a video that I produced and put out, and then we get a whole bunch of comments back, or I get stuck into a bunch of comments and it's something that we may cover in the future. And I think there's some real value to be had there, because a lot of what I'm saying here obviously is my opinion, and then we go to your opinion in the chat afterwards. But there's a whole rake of opinion out there in the interwebs, and I'd love to bring some of that to you. So that's what I'm planning to do today. I'm going to have myself a nice big cup of tea in a second, catch my breath, and I'm going to record possibly the first two of those. So in the next 24, 48 hours, you'll be getting to see those. Let's not forget, the only legal requirement is for the employer to deem his employee competent. Yeah. Although the problem is, and again, this goes back to the multi-tiered approach of the UK construction industry. The fact that an operator working for, let's say, a demolition contractor, as far as his employer is concerned, he might be the blue-eyed boy, the absolute dog's doodahs, the number one excavator operator within the company. But if he turns up on a site of a tier 1 contractor, that word isn't not going to be enough. They're going to need a piece of plastic, aren't they? That way, if you've got a fleet of machines, the ganger would know when and where to send each machine, even when they can't recognise who's driving it. Yeah, and let's not forget, you know, there are certain applications where you would think an experienced operator would be a better option, and there are some applications where maybe a novice could go and learn the ropes. Would you want an inexperienced operator, you know, trenching, you know, busy site, where you're looking for absolute precision? Possibly not. If you're loading trucks and you need to do so quickly, are you going to put a novice operator on that? Probably not. But if there's something that just needs, you know, spoil needs moving from one place to another, and they can sit there and do that for 2-3 hours a day, by the time that 2 or 3 hours are up, they will be, you know, more familiar with the levers. They will be a better operator. They do that for 6 months, 12 months. You're going to end up with an operator, as Jim Turner rightly says there. Training and qualifications are a subject I've posted about a few times on LinkedIn in the past. You're not alone. There are certain subjects, and listen, you know, this is what I do for a living, but there are certain subjects that I write about. Training being one of them, health and safety being another, you know, site fatalities and that kind of thing. And then also things like mental health. They are like a red rag to a bull. You put them up on LinkedIn and the conversation just takes off because people feel so passionately about it. So I totally agree with you on that one, Jim. Mick Norton says, under Section 2-1 of HSWA 1974, that's the Health and Safety at Work Act, it states it shall be the duty of every employer to ensure so far as is reasonably practicable, I have trouble with that, the health and safety and welfare at work of all his employees. As I say, the issue you have is this multi-tiered approach. CDM regs, who's directly responsible? Where does responsibility lie and everything else? As far as I'm concerned, if you are employed, your employer, your direct employer, has a duty of care for you. You have a duty of care for your employer, and so on down the line, regardless of the number of tiers that sit above you. But when it comes to competence, you know, the ultimate police force on this will not be the CITB, it won't be CSCS, it won't be CPCS, it won't be Knockman or any of these others. It will be turning up on site of, you know, a Build UK member company, whoever that might be, Mace, Lang O'Rourke, whoever it might be, and they say, have you got a piece of plastic? And you show them a piece of plastic, and it's either the right piece of plastic or it's the wrong piece of plastic. If it's the right one, crack on, go about your work. If it's the wrong one, you're not coming on site. That's where the difference lies, I think. Enough, people. That's all on an hour, and I was intended to do a quick show today because I want to try and record some of these other stuff. So I'm going to love you and leave you. Everybody, thank you very much indeed for your input. Don't forget, Wednesday evening, the Bobcat origin story. If you're into all things nostalgic, I think you'll enjoy that. But I'll be back here again, same place, same time tomorrow for the Breakfast Show. And I'll see you all then, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Till then, everybody, have a fantastic day. Look after yourselves. All the best.